We are honored to be collaborating with the Air Force and other military divisions that we do, and you'll hear a lot about it from some of our artists today. If you haven't seen the exhibit upstairs, you should go after the lecture and see the incredible art that's hanging upstairs. We only have this happen every 2 years, so it's really special. We have our exhibit every 2 years, and then the art is turned over to the Air Force to be incorporated into their art collection, which is comprised of over 10,000 works of art, and it's pretty amazing. So we have some incredible society member illustrators here today that participate in this program that we have. This year we had 19 of our illustrators participate. Victor is going to moderate for us today. They have all gone out on incredibly interesting missions, which they're going to talk to you about. They're doing amazing things. They're documenting humanity, things that we would never get to see, and they're illustrating it and bringing to us to be able to view. So they're going to introduce themselves. Victor's going to introduce everyone. I'm going to turn this over to Vic, and he's going to spearhead the afternoon. So thanks for coming.
I'm going to introduce Joel Iskowitz, another one of our distinguished members. He's been with the Air Force Art Program also for a long time. He's done so much stuff for the government as well. You know, the programs in terms of Mint, working images for the U.S. Mint. He can explain all that, and he's also got great stories and that he will share with you now. Thank you. Joel.
Thank you, Vic. You really know how to get a guy in trouble. I'll tell you, following all these wonderful artists is daunting, and I have to tell you, I really appreciate being part of this panel, and I really have been tremendously honored to be part of the United States Air Force Art Program. And to be honest with you, just like Melanie, I had an eye out for it. It kind of came in an accidental kind of way. I was up at, I did a lot of, for many years, maybe a decade or more, I did a lot of romance covers, and I used to have to go to a costume rental place to get my, Georgian costumes for my beautiful gals and great looking guys and their clinches. And I met another artist up there getting costumes. He was getting a morning coat, and he was doing a liquor ad or something like that, turn of the century. And it was John Thompson, a wonderful artist. And I said, "What's going on, John?" He said, "Well, I just came back from Afghanistan." And I said, "Say again, Afghanistan? You mean like in the old days, like when Sports Illustrated would send you off to spring training? They sent you to Afghanistan? They had a budget?" And I said, no, it's the Air Force Art Program. I said, "Talk to me, John." And to be honest with you, that's how I really got involved. It grabbed me in many ways. Number one, purely from the sense of adventure. And number two, from a kind of a displaced and long lost sense of history that I really wound up appreciating long after I didn't pay enough attention in school. So I was very fortunate. I joined the Society of Illustrators with that in mind, largely in mind, because it really, as I say, grabbed my attention in terms of what a wonderful thing to be out where the action was happening to actually inform your paintings and your work. I'm a little bit different than everybody else in the sense that I'm not really, it's not one of my fortes, not a great strength of mine to be a reportage artist on the spot. I'll do some sketching, I'll make some compositional notes, but I'll photograph, and I'll basically be a fly on the wall. I'm basically kind of, just along this, for this great ride, and I've been, like Melanie, I've been actually sent to McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey, which was quite exotic, but I've been really fortunate. Thanks to people like John, as chairman of the Air Force Art Program, I got sent on missions documenting the 50th anniversary of World War II, and I flew basically around the world, from Andrews to Hickam Air Force Base, to Japan, to India, across the Himalayas. We say Himalayas, they say Himalayas. I flew and was on a plane with Jim Sharp, God bless him, he's long gone now, but with the heroes of World War II who flew over the hump. I'll show you some images. I've had a number of experiences that, as Melanie said, most people don't get an opportunity to witness and experience. So it's been eye-opening for me, and I hope that the work that I have done, which is kind of basically montage-like, I try and as a narrative artist tell a large story that has a sense of perspective and a sense of resonance. And for my own work, as Vic mentioned, I do a lot of work for the United States Mint, and those narratives that we get are the narratives of this country, only a little over 200 years old, but fascinating narratives that have intertwined and resonantly connected with the work that I've done on these Air Force missions. I'm completely off my notes now, so what I should probably do, I know I do that. Let's see, where is that little thing? I'll show you some of the pictures, and I'll try and say things that are relevant, and they won't be half as amusing as Stevens or as informative as anybody else, but here we go. I feel like I've been honored to be a witness to history, basically, and that's what I try to do. So the first Air Force assignment I had was down at Pope Air Force Base for something called Airlift Rodeo. And a lot of my work is like this, where I see so much, it's a question of what you leave in and what you leave out, and usually I put in too much. But this was a competition among all the allies to judge the competency of a myriad of Air Force and airlift capabilities. And it opened my eye to, I forgot to tell you what John had told me, John Thompson, in that costume house. I said, well, what was the assignment? And he said, well, it was humanitarian airlift. And that's important for you to mention, because as a kind of liberal guy who, marched on Washington in, the 60s against the Vietnam War, back in those days, against the military-industrial complex that Ike warned about. He said it was humanitarian airlift at that time. It was well before the the entry of the United States into Afghanistan in a conventional way. So it was a revelation to me, as so many of my experiences have been traveling with the Air Force. This was a painting. I don't even recall, John, whether it was you who sent me on this, but this is the one I mentioned where I could have painted a series of paintings for a decade. I was sent along with Jim Sharp. Two of us artists accompanied these gentlemen. Some are still with us. The ones that are in sepia are not with us any longer. But I had breakfast and lunch. I walked along the Great Wall of China with this gentleman up here, Colonel Scott, who wrote God is My Co-Pilot. This gentleman here is General John Allison, who in this little sepia vignette wound up forging some of the strategies that were so important in the China, India, Burma theater of war. It was history come alive. I was able to witness on the tarmac in China the first encounters between our diplomatic corps on the tarmac, looking out through a window from our transport plane, and seeing the body language and seeing how diplomacy happens in a very human way. So very, very, very unusual vantage points. There were ceremonies all along the route welcoming the heroes and of the China, India, Burma theater. So that's my painting, which I called Legends of the Burma Hump. Then I think it was maybe John who sent me on, in 2003, I got to go to Berlin. Well, actually, I went to Landstuhl, and they talked about the Berlin airlift, which I knew absolutely nothing about. And I found myself saying to the historian at Landstuhl, I said, you know, they talked about something about the Berlin airlift. Should I be going to Berlin? And I immediately, you know, created 2 tickets for my buddy who was along on this trip, John Downs, a wonderful reportage artist like our artist here, who drew on the spot beautiful, you know, documents. And we went to Berlin, and basically I did this triptych to kind of indicate that both the civilian leadership in the form of Harry S. Truman and the military leadership, Curtis LeMay and others, General Tunner, after the war had the great vision to take our materiel and use it for humanitarian airlift to a former enemy, Germany. And in Berlin, we were sent to the Reichstag, where basically what would be analogous to a senator or a representative in our House of Representatives in the Reichstag was going to take us for an educational tour. She was out on the hustings somewhere, and her aide was assigned to us, unfortunately for her, because, you know, we were a pain in the neck probably to deal with. But she told us, and this put together the triptych for me, she told us that when she was a little girl, before the wall fell, that she used to go to the wall. And she took us to the spot where she used to look out to the west and fantasize about what it was like to be free. And then further told us that when the wall came down, that her whole life changed, and that she traveled and she was able to, you know, work for the government. And so this last panel that alludes to the Ich bin ein Berliner speech of JFK, and it was reiterated, of course, by Reagan decades later. This is her as a little girl, a woman named Anna Lankbein, and her as a grown woman. There's a lot more kind of in this painting, but it's a triptych that tries to tell that epic story. This painting came out of an experience of a mission at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, the cradle of aviation, where the Wright brothers, 2 brothers who were bicycle shop owners and had a dream of flight. So what I tried to do here was take the dream of flight. If I really had a longer canvas or more time, I probably would have started with Icarus and Leonardo, and bring it through all the technological advances that were forged at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which, by the way, are legion. There's something called directorates, many different directorates at Wright-Patterson, their laboratories. And the heads of the laboratories had meetings with us in the morning, basically kind of aw shucks in it and saying, we're not really doing rocket science here. It's really pretty simple, but it was rocket science. And they were brilliant because they were 15 and 20 years ahead. And by the way, Stephen, you know, every photograph we took in these directorates were immediately deleted. You know, our cameras were confiscated because they were doing very, very highly sensitive work. Not only in terms of their directorates of sensory directorates, there was fuel propulsion directorates and technical directorates, but one of the most impressive directorates was the Directorate of Human Resources, where they were doing advanced psychological research into how the brain works and how enemies and terrorists might operate. Really, very abstruse, very wild stuff that winds up being connected to, and that's a kind of leitmotif in my little talk, connected to other experiences I had with the Air Force. By the way, in the propulsion directorate, the director of that laboratory, I sat in his office and I said, what does the future of propulsion look like? And without missing a beat, he said, polynitrogen. I said, polynitrogen? Would you send me a JPEG of a polynitrogen? And so I put that in at the end of the, a little attempt at abstraction there, maybe. That painting, by the way, the Air Force family that's part of our, our partnership with the Society of Illustrators and this wonderful tradition that, by the way, not only goes through World War I and World War II and all the wonderful illustrators that John alluded to in his talk, it really goes back to the Revolutionary era. John Trumbull was George Washington's aide-de-camp, laid down his paintbrush to be George Washington's aide-de-camp, and then wound up, of course, lobbying James, John Adams to have his paintings in the rotunda. I mention that because it all ties up. So anyway, that's Rusty and Greg Thompson, and these guys said, yeah, we've got your painting here. They asked me to the Pentagon to do a painting for them, which I'll show you up next. And I said, I never know where the paintings get assessed, put. Do you have a painting of mine here? And they said, yeah, take a walk with us. And they walked me along the corridor, seeing all the great Air Force art. It's an amazing collection. It's a larger collection than the Louvre. And at the end of the corridor, at the entry to the Department of the Air Force, is where they put my painting. I nearly fell down and cried. It was such an honor. You can see my grin. I can't even believe it. Again, I'm not sure it was you, John, but I was also sent to Normandy, a great mission. That's Jim Consor in the yellow slicker. That's yours truly next to him, a gentleman who spent his own time and money, and this is an important thing to get across, his own time and money to make a monument to the 101st Airborne, who made the D-Day invasion really possible. Those paratroopers of the infantry held bridges that prevented the Germans from taking the beaches at Utah. And I apologize for not having really better photographs. I've got them somewhere in a memory card somewhere. In every single town that was affected in the Cotentin Peninsula, every single year, there are ceremonies. There is a Star-Spangled Banner played along with the Marseillaise. There are the prefectures and the mayors of each town, a lot of pomp and ceremony, and the children and the women get dressed up in 40s regalia, in 40s costume and period costume. And it's so moving because they haven't forgotten. This was the 65th anniversary of D-Day. Every year they have it. And they have not forgotten that now it's 68 years or so of peace and prosperity are owed the Allies who paid the price on the beaches and in the interior of France and up through Belgium. So there are these kinds of, in every single town, and there are all manner of Europeans, Belgians, even Germans, and even the British. Every fortnight, the British go out and they get dressed up as paratroopers and they do the reenactment. It's taken so seriously there. This is a painting I did a couple of years back, I guess, for the last Air Force turnover. The soldier is based on a statue of Iron Mike in a place called La Fière, which was a drop zone where all these paratroopers landed. I took an ambient shot of period French people, basically, with the American flag and the bleu, blanc, rouge. This is not an Air Force painting, but because everything is related, my experiences in Normandy informed this painting. This was actually a private sector commission, and these are the Filthy 13. Guys who, at the behest of their leader, and this man, Jake McNeese, who is part Choctaw, told his men, who were basically on a suicide mission, this is in Exeter Field just on the 5th, preparing for the D-Day jump, to shave their heads warrior style, Mohawk style, and paint their faces with war paint from the still wet invasion stripes on the fuselage. The story is amazing. If Spielberg got a hold of that, along with Tom Hanks, they would have been as famous as the Easy Company. I only had this one photograph at a field where they reenacted the drops where, you know, many, many paratroopers are, little boys were dressed up like the filthy 13 with painted faces. In Saint-Mère-Église, there were tanks going through the street, and many, 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 many people there. And some of the reenacting soldiers knew of my painting, which, you know, about 4 people have seen in America. Another private sector painting that related, because that is a man from the Easy Company, Wild Bill Guarnere, who wound up being portrayed in the Hanks and Spielberg Band of Brothers. He's still alive. I visited him in Philadelphia. He left his leg in Bastogne. He was called Wild Bill Guarnere because his brother, he found out before his jump into Normandy, was killed in a casino, Italy. This is the painting that the Air Force people at the Pentagon, Rusty and crew, said, we want you to look at a wall, come to the Pentagon, and we want a painting that that talks about, you know, the unseen aspect of the Air Force, the personal again. And so I measured the wall, and I took, you know, account for the exit sign in the way, and I said, okay, it's going to be a long one. And on the way out, the then curator, Guy Franklin, he said, hey, Joel, you know, while you're thinking of themes and trying to get inspiration, when I was in uniform, I wrote a poem, and it was called The Other Side of the Coin. And we're walking out of the Pentagon, and he said, you know, you're the coin guy, Joel. I've done a lot of coins. I've been honored to be tasked by the United States Mint. And many of those themes are military and historic, and my work with the Air Force certainly informs them. So he said, you're the coin. And he gave me an idea that I had done the eagle coin, the American bald eagle coin. And his poem, basically, to paraphrase and condense it, talked about the symbols of America, the symbols of democracy, and how real people in the passes of Kandahar, you know, in the heat, in the loneliness, paid prices of you know, dear treasure and life and limb to secure the freedoms for a mom to wave goodbye to her little girl on a school bus. So this is all about symbolism and the real sacrifices of real people that's behind the symbolism. That gives it meaning. This is just a painting that I put in because I like it, and it's the first around the world flight. It was my second trip to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I got to go, lucky guy, I got to go once with Vin de Fate. We hit up and lobbied a gentleman named Bob Shulman to have us come down to Kennedy Space Center, Cape Canaveral, and we spent 10 days there getting schooled on the city of people, the intense amount of effort in the shuttle program, and also the history behind it, everything that led up to it. I can't tell you how overly impressive all that was, and then that all led up to the first launch that I've ever seen in real live space, and we had privileged access because Bob Shulman was a master of passes. He got us into at one point the Italian team that was putting together actually it was an international team led by an Italian astrophysicist who was putting together the Cassini probe, and he got us into this place where the Italian, he was waving us off like, you know, you can't come here, you know, because it's completely, you know, you're going to contaminate it. In any event, that was my painting for NASA, but then I got to go again. Again, I never know whether, I got to go again and witness the Air Force's support, which is enormous. And the Air Force always felt, by the way, that they were undersung, that all the glory went to the NASA guys. They did something called emergency preparedness, which I can't begin to tell you how much energy and how much personnel goes into making sure that this amazing event, that if you're standing across the water, and this is the second time I witnessed it, and more than witnessed it, felt it, the waves of energy, the birds leaving the entire area of Earth that this incredible event happens, and there's no film, there's no IMAX film, there's no painting, there's no photography that equates with that experience. And to know that there are 6 or so individuals, you know, sitting on top are just phenomenal. Basically, I'm showing you a couple of, this is the history of the Army, of the gold coin. I was honored to get selected for the Medal of Honor, which commemorative coin, which goes back to Lincoln, began in our Civil War. This is when I was down at Bragg, because the wing commander of the 440th, which took the Filthy 13 and 101st on D-Day to Europe, is still the transport for guys who are Iron Mike, our special ops guys. And I also wound up doing the infantry coin. And the funny thing about that is, of course, you know, it's illustrator's bane. I live in Woodstock, New York. So I went to the reserve unit, and I had some guys pose for me that were very terrific, but they were weekenders, you know, they were engineers. And then the gentleman who was the commander of the 440th calls me up and says, "Joel, I want you down here at Fort Bragg. I want you to come down here because I want you to paint the nose art for our special ops." So I wind up going down to Fort Bragg. Wow, you know, the nose art for special ops. This is right after the Bin Laden, episode. And so I go down to Fort Bragg, and one of the things I witnessed down there is 250 Green Berets getting their Green Beret. And now I'm in a huge airplane hangar at this ceremony with 250 perfect Iron Mike models. When for my coin for the infantry, I used, you know, these weekend guys. I really like that, from Kingston, you know. This was one of the comps that I'd done for that. There was a switch of leadership there. I'm still waiting for the go-ahead. It's like a year already to see if it's going to go on the plane. One thing I do want to mention to you that's an eye-opening experience for me is that when I was down there at Fort Bragg, the special ops people told me in no uncertain terms, and I learned in no uncertain terms, that our understanding of special ops is a little shallow. We think of Delta Force, and we think of Rangers, and we think of, you know, Navy SEALs, and we think of, you know, Elite Assassin and SWAT team. They've got that. They've got that down. But what special ops, the heart of what special ops were about, and this really hit home, was that they talk about things like asymmetric war. They talk about things like the soldier diplomat. They talk about their motto is the head of the arrow. You saw the arrowhead in their logo. They're the head of the arrow. Okay, they're capable of tremendous, you know, operational ability, but their whole thrust is, like the directorates at Wright-Patterson, to be 20 years ahead of conventional war. What they're trying to do is they're trying to not only win hearts and minds, but actually befriend nations in a way that truly exports, not in a crass way, but in an empathetic way. I was really, really, really impressed with the intelligence and the sophistication that most of us don't get through the usual media about what goes on in the elite areas of our military. This is just another aspect of the fact that all of my trips and experiences with the Air Force helps inform what I do at the Mint. By the way, this connects. These are the Nisei soldiers of World War II. When I went to Hickam Air Force Base in Hawaii, D-Day and our entry into World War II was certainly a response to the Day of Infamy. Well, infamous for these Japanese Americans, they were interred themselves. They were not allowed to serve. When they did serve, they served with the greatest distinction, among the most decorated in our military's history, and they wound up finally getting a Congressional Gold Medal, which I'm proud to say I witnessed those gentlemen get. And the Women's Air Force Service Pilots, what talk about women. These women flew experimental jets that the men were afraid to fly. They were the only ones who would do it. They loved to fly. They loved adventure so much. And they never forgot their lipstick and their eye makeup either. They didn't miss anything about being feminine, and they were better than 10 men. And they finally got their recognition. They were unceremoniously removed from service and sent home, and the ones that died in service didn't have their funerals paid for. They finally got their gold medal last November. And am I shouting?
No. You're leaning on the mic and it's going.
Oh, I'm leaning on the mic. It's going. I'm saying this is the next to last slide. And this connects up to Cape Canaveral and my 2 trips down there. And I never would have been able to, by the way, when you do a drawing for the Mint, you're invited to submit along with 40 other artists, both internal Mint artists in-house and something called the Artistic Infusion Program, which I'm still a part of. Please let it keep going on. It's a competition every time. And it goes through an elaborate Byzantine process. And if you get selected, it is like a rocket going off because it lives forever. Well, to get this selected was really meaningful to me, and I think my experiences traveling with the Air Force certainly informed it down at Cape Canaveral. The glory for me was, and I got the reverse as well, the obverse, the heads, and the reverse tails. And I got to see in the rotunda of the Capitol where John Trumbull's, remember John Trumbull who laid down his brush as Washington's aide-de-camp, where John Trumbull's murals were, my artwork was there, with the leadership of Congress kind of oohing and ahhing over my medal, and I got to see these men receive their medal, and I even got to go afterward to a welcoming reception where I got to tell John Glenn that my most exciting piece of reading ever was coming across a PDF document, a crummy little PDF document in NASA's archives. Because I wanted to get the proper pitch and yaw and angle of John Glenn's Friendship 7. And I came across something called Pilot's Flight Report. And I got to tell John Glenn that in his matter-of-fact NASA-ese, his experiences, which were totally hair-raising, by the way, as Tom Wolfe, made clear, it was just a moment of great glory for me. This is the last thing I did for the Air Force, which is kind of just a pastel comp of something that's going to be large and probably too complicated. Because my last Air Force trip was to D.C. I thought I was going to be witnessing, which I did, the presidential airlift and Air Force One, and I saw all that. I saw President Obama and Prime Minister Cameron, and it was all one. But the most impressive thing to me was seeing the dedication and just the dedication and the heraldry and the honor and duty of the honor guard that is tasked with the interment of heroes in our national cemetery. And we got to see them practicing. We got to see them go through their elaborate paces, and I was deeply, deeply moved by that. And so I did this pastel in preparation for much larger work. And I'm sorry I didn't have that many things that were that much fun, but that's it for me.